My name is Natalie Parker, and I was 34 years old when my parents handed the education fund my grandparents created for me to my older brother at my graduation dinner. I had just completed my nursing leadership program after working nights for 3 years to pay my own tuition. Because my mother Helen always told me the account my grandparents left was complicated and couldn't be touched yet. Then, in front of 12 relatives, she raised a glass and said, "We decided the education money should go to the child who will actually use it better." My father Richard slid a cashier's check across the table to my brother Jason. He smiled like he had earned it. I sat there holding my certificate while my whole family pretended not to see my face. 3 days later, Jennifer Cole, the manager at First Harbor Bank, called me in. She opened a withdrawal file, pointed to a signature that was supposed to be mine, and asked, "Natalie, who authorized this transfer?" The graduation dinner was held in the back room of Marlowe's, the same steakhouse my parents used whenever they wanted a family moment to look more expensive than it felt. I arrived, still wearing the navy dress I had worn under my graduation gown, my certificate tucked carefully inside a folder on the passenger seat. I was 34 years old, tired from 3 years of night shifts and weekend classes, but proud in a quiet way. I had finished my nursing leadership program without help from my parents. Without touching the education fund my grandparents had promised me, and without letting exhaustion convince me to quit. For once, I thought the dinner might simply be about that. I was wrong. My mother Helen stood when I entered, kissed the air near my cheek, and said, "There she is." My father Richard lifted his glass without getting up. My older brother Jason was already seated beside him, laughing with my aunt like he was the guest of honor. That should have been my first warning. Jason had never attended one of my work events, never asked about my classes, never remembered what program I was in. But that night, he wore a new blazer and had an envelope sitting beside his plate. I noticed it immediately because my mother kept touching it, like she was waiting for the right moment to perform. Dinner was almost over when she stood again and tapped her spoon against her glass. "We have one more announcement," she said. I smiled because I thought maybe, just maybe, she was going to say she was proud of me. Instead, she turned toward Jason. "Your grandparents believed in education," she said, "and we've decided the remaining education money should go to the child who will actually use it better." The room went strangely quiet. My father slid the envelope across the table to Jason. "This will help with your business certification," he said. Jason opened it just enough for me to see the cashier's check inside. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. That account was for me, I said. My mother's smile tightened. "Natalie, don't be selfish. You already finished your program." I looked at her. "I paid for it myself because you told me the fund couldn't be touched yet." My father sighed like I had embarrassed him. "We didn't want you depending on money that might be needed elsewhere." Jason leaned back and said, "Come on, Nut. You're a nurse. You'll be fine." That was the sentence that broke something in me. Not because he was wrong about me surviving. I always survived. But because survival had become the excuse they used to take from me, I looked around the table. 12 relatives. My certificate beside my plate. My brother holding money my grandparents had saved for my education. Nobody defended me. My aunt looked at her napkin. My cousin stared into her water glass. My mother lifted her chin and said, "This is a celebration. Don't ruin it." I stood slowly, picked up my certificate folder, and said, "You already did." Then I walked out before they could call me dramatic. 3 days later, First Harbor Bank called. Jennifer Cole asked me to come in about a withdrawal file connected to my education account. I thought she wanted to explain the transfer. Instead, she opened the file, pointed to a signature at the bottom, and asked, "Natalie, is this yours?" The education account started with my grandparents. Not my parents. Grandma Louise and Grandpa Walter opened it when I was 8 years old. After I told them I wanted to become a nurse, because nurses were the only people in hospitals who didn't talk to children like they were furniture. Grandpa laughed so hard he had to wipe his glasses. But Grandma just looked at me and said, "Then we'll make sure no one can tell you no when the time comes." Every birthday after that, they put money into the account instead of buying big gifts. While Jason got bikes, game consoles, and weekend trips with my parents, I got birthday cards from my grandparents with one line written inside, "For the girl who will use it well." For years, Mom told me the account was complicated. When I started community college, she said the money was locked until I transferred. When I transferred, she said it was better to save it for graduate school. When I started the nursing leadership program at 31, she said the paperwork would take months, and I should just use payment plans for now. I believed her longer than I should have because I wanted to believe my grandparents' gift was still waiting for me somewhere safe. So I worked nights, picked up extra shifts, skipped vacations, and paid tuition in pieces while Mom kept saying, "Don't worry, Natalie, we'll handle the fund when the timing is right." The first time I realized something was wrong was 2 years before graduation, when Grandma Louise's old attorney mailed me a copy of a document I had never seen. It was titled Custodial Education Account Agreement. My name was printed as the intended beneficiary. My mother's name was listed as custodian until I reached the age of majority. Under special instructions, Grandpa had written, "Funds are to support Natalie Parker's education and professional training, not general family use." I remember staring at that sentence in my apartment after a 12-hour shift, still wearing scrubs, wondering why my mother had never once mentioned that the account was not supposed to be complicated forever. I called her that night. "Mom, why does this document say you were only custodian until I became an adult?" She went quiet, then laughed softly. "Because old documents use old language. You wouldn't understand the banking side of it. Then explain it." Her voice cooled. "Natalie, after everything we've done for you, don't start acting like we stole something." I had not used the word stole. She had. That was the moment my stomach tightened. My father got on the phone next and said, "Your mother has managed that account for years. Don't turn gratitude into suspicion." Then Jason texted me 15 minutes later, "Mom says you're upset about money." Real classy. After that, I requested records from First Harbor Bank twice. Both times, the response went to my mother's address, not mine. When I asked why, she said she was still the contact on file. When I asked to be added, she told me not to make a banking issue out of a family matter. I was tired, overwhelmed, and too busy trying to pass clinical leadership exams to fight her every week. So we let it sit. That is one of the hardest parts to admit. I did not ignore the warning signs because I was stupid. I ignored them because exhaustion makes peace look like strategy. A month before graduation, I found one more birthday card from Grandma Louise, tucked inside an old textbook. "For my Natalie, your education is yours. Don't let anyone make you beg for what was already set aside." I read that line standing in my kitchen. And for the first time, I wondered if Grandma had known my mother better than I did. 3 weeks later, my parents handed Jason the cashier's check at my graduation dinner. And 3 days after that, Jennifer Cole at First Harbor Bank showed me a withdrawal authorization that carried my name, but not my hand. I arrived at First Harbor Bank expecting someone to explain a misunderstanding. Jennifer Cole, the branch manager, met me in the lobby and led me into a small conference room with glass walls overlooking the customer service floor. She was probably in her early 50s, dressed in a navy blazer with a name badge clipped neatly to her lapel. She didn't offer coffee or make small talk. Instead, she placed a blue file on the table and said, Ms. Parker, thank you for coming in on short notice. Before we continue, I need to verify your identity. I handed her my driver's license. She compared it with the information on her screen, nodded once, and then turned the monitor slightly away before opening the file. The first page carried the title Withdrawal Authorization Request. Under the account number was the name I hadn't seen connected to that education fund in years, Natalie Ann Parker. My heart started beating faster. Jennifer pointed to the bottom of the page. Is this your signature? I leaned forward. For a second, I almost said yes because it looked close enough to fool someone who didn't know me. Then I noticed something I had never done in my life. The signature used my full middle name, Ineversina Natalie Ann Parker. Every legal document I had ever completed was signed Natalie A. Parker or simply Natalie Parker. No, I said quietly. That's not my signature. Jennifer didn't react. She simply made a note on the form. Can you tell me why you're certain? I took a slow breath. Because I don't sign my middle name. Never. My nursing license. My mortgage application. My passport. Every employment record. They're all the same. Jennifer nodded again. Thank you. That's important. She opened another section of the file. This withdrawal was processed 4 days before your graduation dinner. I frowned. 4 days, yes. She slid a bank transaction summary toward me. The education account had been reduced to almost zero before my mother ever handed Jason the cashier's check in front of the family. The celebration hadn't been the decision. It had been the announcement. My stomach tightened as Jennifer continued. The withdrawal request was presented in person by the account custodian. My mother. I whispered. Jennifer didn't answer directly. The account records show Mrs. Helen Parker appeared with another individual, listed as an authorized family representative. I already knew who that was. Jason. I didn't need the file to tell me. Jennifer continued carefully. Normally. Because the account beneficiary had reached adulthood years earlier. We require additional verification before releasing funds. I looked up. Then why was the money released? Jennifer closed the file for a moment. That's the question we're trying to answer. She opened one final envelope inside the file and removed a photocopy of my driver's license. I stared at it in confusion. That's an old license. I lost it almost 3 years ago. Jennifer looked at me over the top of her glasses. According to the withdrawal record, this was presented as identification during the transaction. My chest went cold. I remembered exactly when I had lost that license. I had searched my apartment for hours before requesting a replacement. My mother had helped me look that weekend when she came over with groceries. She was the one who suggested maybe I had thrown it away by accident. Jennifer watched my face carefully. Ms. Parker, she said gently, has anyone in your family ever had access to your personal documents? I didn't answer immediately because suddenly dozens of small memories began fitting together. My mother asking where I kept my important papers. Jason borrowing my filing cabinet key one Christmas because he said he needed a safe place for gifts. The missing driver's license. The repeated excuses about the education fund. None of those moments had frightened me on their own. Together, they formed something much darker. Jennifer closed the folder and folded her hands on top of it. I'm not accusing anyone, she said. But based on what you've told me today, I cannot treat this as a routine banking inquiry. She reached for the office phone and pressed a single button. I'd like our compliance department to review this withdrawal immediately. Then she looked back at me. Natalie, before this account was emptied, someone convinced the bank that you had already agreed to it. And right now, I need to find out exactly how that happened. Jennifer Cole did not let me leave the branch with only a copy of the withdrawal form. She made a second copy, stamped it, internal review, and placed it into a red folder instead of the blue one she had first shown me. That color change should not have meant anything to me. But it did. Blue had felt like banking. Red felt like alarm. "Ms. Parker," she said, "I'm placing a compliance hold on the remaining activity connected to this withdrawal." I looked at the transaction summary, but the money is already gone. Jennifer nodded. "The funds left this account." "Yes. That doesn't mean the transaction is closed." A man named Anthony Brooks joined us 15 minutes later. His badge said Regional Compliance Officer. He introduced himself, verified my identity again, and asked Jennifer to summarize only what she knew, not what she suspected. I noticed that immediately. Compliance. People did not speak like families. They did not say Natalie is being dramatic, or Helen meant well, or Jason just needed help. They asked for dates, documents, authorization, custody history, and proof. Anthony looked at me and said, "Did you personally authorize this withdrawal?" "No." "Did you sign this form?" "No." "Did you give your mother or brother permission to sign on your behalf?" He wrote each answer down. Then Jennifer showed him the photocopy of my old license. Anthony's expression changed for the first time. This ID was expired at the time of withdrawal. Jennifer nodded. "And Ms. Parker reports it was lost 3 years ago." Anthony turned to me. "Do you have any record of reporting it?" "Lost." I opened my phone, searched my email, and found the DMV replacement confirmation from 3 years earlier. I forwarded it to Jennifer while Anthony waited. He read the date, then looked back at the withdrawal file. The ID used to support this transaction had already been replaced. He wrote another note. Slower this time, at 3:42 that afternoon. Anthony made a call to First Harbor's internal fraud desk. He did not call it fraud in front of me at first. He called it identity verification concern. But I heard the shift. I heard the way Jennifer's voice became quieter when she answered a question from someone on speaker. I heard the words, adult beneficiary. Custodian authority expired. Disputed signature. Style identification. Paper by paper. The story my parents had told at dinner started turning into something else entirely. Not family generosity. Not a parental decision. A withdrawal that should never have passed without me. Before I left, Jennifer handed me a printed incident receipt. "This doesn't resolve anything today," she said, "but it documents that you disputed the withdrawal as unauthorized." I took it with both hands. "What happens next?" Anthony answered. "We review teller notes, camera footage, electronic signatures, account history, and internal approvals. We also notify the receiving account that funds may be subject to recall." My stomach turned. Receiving account. Jennifer looked at Anthony before answering. "The cashier's check issued to Jason Parker was funded from the withdrawal. If it has not cleared, we may be able to stop it." I looked at the red folder on the table and thought about Jason smiling at dinner while holding that envelope. For the first time, I realized the check he thought he had earned might not be his to cash. Jason tried to cash the check the next morning. I know because Jennifer Cole called me at 918 while I was getting ready for my shift at the hospital. "Natalie," she said, skipping the formal greeting this time. "I wanted to let you know the cashier's check has been presented." I sat down on the edge of my bed. "By Jason, yes. At our Westbrook branch." Her voice stayed professional, but I could hear the tension underneath. Because of the compliance hold, the teller was instructed to escalate the transaction before releasing funds. I closed my eyes and pictured Jason standing at the counter. Confident, probably impatient, completely unaware that the check in his hand had started leaving a trail behind him. Jennifer asked if I could come to the bank after my shift. By the time I arrived, Anthony Brooks was already in the conference room with another red folder on the table. "The check has not cleared," he said. "We placed a stop pending investigation." Relief hit me so suddenly I had to grip the back of the chair. Jennifer slid a printed teller note across the table. Customer became agitated when advised of verification delay. Claimed funds were family education, money gifted by parents. Requested manager approval. "He said it was gifted by my parents," I asked. Anthony nodded. "That's what the note says." I looked at the line again. Family education money. Not Natalie's account. Not grandparents' fund. Family money. Jason had already started changing the language. Then Jennifer opened another document. "This is the receiving account information he provided for deposit. Jason Parker Business Development LLC." I stared at the page. Business development. Jason had not enrolled in any certification program. He had not applied for school. He had not even mentioned classes at dinner. My father had said the money would help with his business certification. But the deposit account was for his company. Anthony underlined the account name with one finger. If the funds were withdrawn from an education account under the representation they were, for qualified education purposes, depositing them into a business account creates another issue. My phone buzzed before anyone could continue. "Mom." He let it ring. Then Dad. Then Jason. Finally. A text came through from my mother. "What did you do at the bank? Jason is humiliated." I almost laughed, because the word humiliated had never been available when I was the one holding my certificate while my brother held my check. I turned the phone toward Jennifer and Anthony. Anthony read it. Then said, "Save that." A second message arrived from Jason. "You had no right to freeze my money." Jennifer's eyebrows lifted slightly. "His money?" she asked. "I saved that too." Anthony leaned back in his chair. "Natalie, I need to ask this clearly. Did your grandparents ever intend this account to fund Jason Parker's business?" "No," I said. "They opened it for my education." "Do you have anything in writing?" I opened my bag and removed Grandma Louise's old birthday card. The one I had found inside my textbook. "Your education is yours. Don't let anyone make you beg for what was already set aside." Jennifer read it first. Her expression softened. Anthony read it after her and placed it carefully into the red folder. "Not legal authority by itself," he said, "but very useful context." As I left the bank, another text from Jason appeared. "Mom says if you don't fix this tonight, don't come to Sunday dinner." I stood in the parking lot with my work bag over one shoulder and felt strangely calm. 3 days earlier, they had used a graduation dinner to prove I was powerless. Now the bank had stopped the check before Jason could turn my grandparents' education fund into business capital. For the first time, the question was no longer whether my family would admit what they had done. The question was how much paper they had left behind while doing it. Jennifer called me again the next afternoon. "Natalie." Compliance pulled the teller notes and camera timestamps from the original withdrawal. I was in the hospital break room, still wearing scrubs, with 10 minutes left before my next round. "What did they find?" She was quiet for a second. The teller flagged the transaction before it was approved. I sat up straighter, flagged it for what Jennifer answered carefully. Expired identification, adult beneficiary status, and an unusually large withdrawal from an education account. For the first time, I felt the bank had seen what my family tried to hide before I ever walked into that branch. After my shift, I drove straight to First Harbor. Anthony Brooks was waiting with Jennifer in the same conference room, but this time there were printed screenshots on the table. The teller who handled your mother's request entered 3 warnings. Anthony said. He pointed to the first note. Beneficiary over age of majority. Custodian authority requires review. The second note read ID presented appears expired. The third read, withdrawal purpose listed as education, but receiving party not beneficiary. I stared at the last sentence. So, someone noticed. Jennifer nodded. Yes. The teller did her job. I looked from her to Anthony. Then why did the money leave? Anthony slid another page forward. Because the transaction was overridden by a branch supervisor. The word overridden hit me harder than I expected. This was no longer only about my mother standing at a counter with an old license and a fake signature. Someone inside the bank had seen the warnings and approved it anyway. Who, I asked. Jennifer's face tightened. A supervisor from the Westbrook branch named Carla Mead. She marked it as Family Authorized Educational Disbursement. I read the phrase twice. Family Authorized Educational Disbursement. 3 words that made theft sound polite. Jennifer opened another document. We also pulled camera timestamps. Your mother was at the counter. Jason was beside her. Your father arrived later. After the supervisor was called over, my stomach tightened. Dad was there. Anthony looked at the page. According to the footage, he appears for the last 4 minutes of the transaction. I thought of Richard sliding the cashier's check across the table at dinner and saying nothing while Mom humiliated me. Did he sign anything? Jennifer shook her head. No. But he was present when the override was approved. Somehow, that hurt in a different way. Not because he created the lie, but because he stood close enough to watch it become real. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Stop making this ugly. Your grandparents wanted family to benefit. I showed it to Anthony. He read it. Then asked, Did your grandparents ever use that phrase in any account document, family benefit? I shook my head. The agreement said, my education and professional training. Jennifer opened the custodial agreement copy. Correct. Then Anthony made a note. That matters. Because the bank approved a withdrawal under a purpose that does not match the written account instructions. Before I left, Jennifer handed me a copy of the incident update. This review is escalating to internal audit. She said, they will look at the supervisor override, the stale ID, and whether the bank failed to protect the beneficiary's interest. I looked down at the words beneficiary's interest and felt a strange ache in my chest. My grandparents had written that account for me when I was a child. For years, my family treated it like a favor they could redistribute. Now, finally, someone was reading it as what it had always been, a promise with my name on it. Internal audit contacted me 2 days later. Not Jennifer. That was how I knew the review had moved beyond a branch mistake. The woman who called introduced herself as Melissa Grant, Audit Manager for First Harbor's Consumer Accounts Division. Her voice was polite but direct. Miss Parker, I'm reviewing the education account withdrawal processed at our Westbrook branch. I need to confirm whether you were present for that transaction. I was sitting in my car outside the hospital after a 12-hour shift. Too tired to feel anything except the strange clarity that comes when exhaustion burns away. Fear? No. I said. Were you contacted by phone during the transaction? No. Did you provide verbal authorization to your mother? Your brother? Your father? Or any First Harbor employee? No. Melissa paused just long enough for me to hear typing. Thank you. That is consistent with what our records are beginning to show. The next morning, Jennifer asked me to come in again. This time, she and Anthony were joined by Melissa on a video screen. On the table was a document titled Supervisor Override Review. Melissa explained that the teller had followed procedure by flagging the withdrawal. But Carla Mead, the Westbrook supervisor, overrode the warning after speaking privately with my mother. What did my mother say? I asked. Melissa looked down at her notes. According to Ms. Mead, your mother said you were unreachable, that the funds were urgently needed for a time-sensitive educational expense, and that your brother was acting as the family representative. I almost laughed. Jason's business account was the destination. Anthony nodded. That is one of the reasons this review escalated. Then Jennifer slid over a copy of the override reason Carla had typed into the system. Beneficiary aware. Family approved transfer for education-related use. I stared at the first two words. Beneficiary aware. She wrote that I knew yes. Jennifer said quietly. Based on your mother's statement. Not direct confirmation from you. The room felt too still. My mother had not only used my name, she had turned my silence into consent by claiming I already knew. Melissa added, Our policy requires direct beneficiary confirmation when custodian authority is unclear and the beneficiary is an adult. That did not happen. My phone buzzed while Melissa was still speaking. Jason. I ignored it. Then a text appeared. If you keep pushing this, Mom says the bank will charge you for fraud because you abandoned the account. I showed it to Anthony. He took a photo of the screen with my permission. That's not how this works, he said. Jennifer's face softened. And Natalie. Abandoned is not a banking category your family gets to invent. For some reason, that sentence almost made me cry. My mother had spent years using vague words to make me feel responsible for things she controlled. Complicated. Timing. Family. Abandoned. The bank was taking those words away and replacing them with records. Melissa leaned closer to the camera. There's one more thing. The override was approved at 4:16 p.m. The cashier's check was issued at 4:22 at 4:30 1. Your mother emailed the branch supervisor a scanned letter claiming you had verbally agreed to redirect the funds to Jason. I sat up. What letter? Jennifer opened the red folder and placed the scan in front of me. It was a one-page statement with my typed name at the bottom. No real signature. Just typed initials, NAP. It said I was voluntarily releasing the education fund for family use. I looked at Jennifer. I never wrote this. Melissa nodded slowly. That is why legal is now being notified. The typed letter changed the room. Until that moment, I had been angry at my parents for taking money my grandparents had set aside for me. Angry at Jason for accepting it. Angry at my father for sitting there while it happened. But seeing my name typed beneath a statement I had never written made the whole thing colder. It was no longer only a family decision dressed up as fairness. It was a document created to make the bank believe I had agreed to disappear from my own account. I read the first line twice. I tell Natalie Ann Parker. Voluntarily release all remaining education funds for family-directed use. Family-directed use? My grandparents had written my education. My mother had rewritten it as family. Jennifer Cole watched my face carefully. Do you recognize this document? I shook my head. No. Anthony Brooks asked, Do you use those initials? I looked at the typed NAP at the bottom. No. You sign Natalie Parker or Natalie A. Parker. I don't initial legal documents with my full initials. And I never use my middle name unless a form requires it. Melissa Grant's voice came through the screen. That matches the signature concern from the withdrawal authorization. Anthony made another note. Pattern of inconsistent identity use. The phrase sounded sterile, but it captured something my family had done for years. They used versions of me that were convenient, then blamed me when I didn't recognize myself. Jennifer turned to the second page in the packet. The email from your mother to Carla Mead said you were working a hospital shift and couldn't come in, but had approved the transfer by phone. I almost laughed. I was working that day, but no one from the bank called me. Melissa nodded. We checked outbound call logs. No call was made to your number before the override. Anthony added, and if a verbal approval is claimed, policy requires documentation of who confirmed it, when, and how identity was verified. That record does not exist. One missing call log did what all my protests at family dinners never could. It proved I had not been consulted. Then Jennifer opened the transaction timeline, A/3:57 p.m. Teller flags expired ID. 43. M. Custodian requests supervisor. 4:12 p. M. Email with typed release letter received. 4:16 p. M. Supervisor override approved. 4:22 p. M. Cashier's check issued. 6 minutes. That was how long it took them to turn my grandparents' promise into Jason's business money after the supervisor accepted the letter. I stared at the timeline and felt a grief I hadn't expected. Grandma Louise and Grandpa Walter had saved for years. My mother had erased them in 6 minutes. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Dad. Nathalie. Your mother says this is going too far. Please call before lawyers get involved. I showed it to Anthony. He read it and said, Lawyers are already involved now. Jennifer looked at me gently. First Harbor Legal has been notified. They'll determine whether the bank must reimburse the account while pursuing recovery from the improper transaction. Reimburse. I had been so focused on stopping Jason's check that I had not considered the possibility that the account itself could be restored. Are you saying the money might go back? I asked. Melissa answered from the screen. If the bank determines the withdrawal was improperly approved, yes. The beneficiary should not absorb the loss of a transaction we failed to verify. I leaned back in the chair and covered my mouth. For years, my parents had made the education fund sound like a family favor. Something I should be grateful to maybe receive one day. But the bank was speaking about it differently. Beneficiary. Loss. Verification. Reimbursement. These words did not make me greedy. They made me visible. Before the meeting ended, Melissa said, Nathalie, preserve every family message from this point forward. Pressure after a disputed transaction can matter. I nodded. On my way home, my mother called 4 times. I let each call go to voicemail. The 5th time, she left a message. You're going to ruin Jason's future over money you didn't even need. I saved it. Because for the first time, I understood the truth. My family had never believed I needed the money because they had never counted my struggle as real. First Harbor Legal called me the next morning while I was walking into the hospital for my shift. The attorney introduced herself as Laura Bennett, counsel for the bank's Consumer Compliance Division. She spoke carefully, the way people do when every sentence might matter later. Ms. Parker, I'm calling to inform you that First Harbor has opened a formal legal review of the withdrawal from your custodial education account. I stepped into an empty hallway near the staff elevators. Does that mean the bank thinks the withdrawal was unauthorized? Laura paused. It means the bank has identified enough verification failures to treat the transaction as disputed and potentially improper. We are not asking you to prove your family's intent. We are reviewing whether the bank followed its own obligations. That distinction mattered. For days, my mother had made this sound like a family fight. Jason had called it his money. Dad had called it going too far. But Laura did not ask who was selfish or who deserved help more. She asked whether the custodian still had authority, whether an adult beneficiary was contacted, whether expired identification should have been accepted, whether a typed release letter with no verified signature could justify an override. We are placing a recovery notice on the cashier's check and the receiving business account, she said. If funds have not cleared, they remain frozen. If any portion cleared, we will pursue return. I looked at the clock. My shift started in 6 minutes. But I couldn't move. And the education account, Laura said. If our review confirms bank error, First Harbor will restore the account and pursue recovery separately. I worked that day in a strange fog. Patients needed medication. Families needed updates. Monitors beeped. Doctors rounded. And somewhere beneath all of it, my phone kept buzzing in my locker. By lunch, I had 7 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Jason, And one from Dad. Jason left a voicemail. Natalie. Call the bank and tell them this is a misunderstanding. My business account is frozen. I have payroll due Friday. I saved it. Mom left 2 messages. The first was tearful. Your grandparents would be ashamed of you. The second was sharper. You are punishing your brother because you never had the courage to build something of your own. I saved both. Not because I wanted revenge. Because Laura had said pressure after a disputed transaction could matter. After my shift, I drove to First Harbor again. Jennifer and Anthony were waiting with a new document titled Preliminary Legal Findings. Anthony walked me through it slowly. Finding 1 custodial authority should have been reviewed because you are no longer a minor. Finding 2 beneficiary confirmation was required and not obtained. Finding 3, the identification presented was expired and previously replaced. Finding 4, the typed release letter did not meet signature verification requirements. Finding 5, the receiving account did not match the stated education purpose. I stared at the list. 5 failures. 5 places where someone could have stopped it. 5 places where my grandparents' money should have been protected. Jennifer placed 1 final page in front of me. It was an internal memo from First Harbor Legal. The last line read, "Beneficiary should be made whole pending completion of recovery process." I read it 3 times. Made whole. I whispered. Anthony nodded. It means the bank is preparing to restore the account balance while continuing its own recovery from the transaction and any responsible parties. My eyes burned. I thought about Grandma Louise writing, "Don't let anyone make you beg for what was already set aside." For years, I had begged for information, for access, for honesty. Now the bank was saying I should never have had to beg at all. My phone buzzed again on the table. This time it was a text from my father. "Please come to the house tonight. Your mother is scared." I showed it to Jennifer. She read it, then looked at me with more kindness than a bank manager was required to have. "Natalie, fear is not the same as accountability." Anthony added, "If you go, don't go alone, and don't sign anything." I almost smiled at that. Because 5 days earlier my family had made me feel like a selfish daughter for asking questions. Now a bank manager, a compliance officer, and a bank attorney were all telling me the same thing my grandparents had tried to say years before. This money had my name on it for a reason. I went to my parents' house that night. But I didn't go alone. My cousin Rebecca came with me. The same cousin who had quietly sent me photos from family events when my mother forgot to invite me. I brought the preliminary legal findings, the withdrawal form, the teller notes, the typed release letter, and Grandma Louise's birthday card in a folder. When we walked in, Mom was already at the dining table with Dad beside her and Jason standing near the kitchen island. No one offered coffee. No one asked how my shift went. My mother only looked at the folder in my hand and said, "So you brought evidence against your own family?" I sat down. "No. Mom, I brought the documents your bank created after you used my name." Jason scoffed. "Your name. That money was sitting there for years," Rebecca said quietly. "Sitting in an account for Natalie." My mother turned on her. "This is family business." Rebecca didn't move. Then maybe the family should hear the truth. Dad rubbed his forehead and said, "Can we please keep this calm?" I looked at him. "You were there when the withdrawal was approved." His hand froze. "I didn't sign anything." "No," I said. "You just watched." I opened the folder and placed the typed release letter on the table. "Who wrote this?" My mother looked away. Jason said nothing. Dad stared at the paper like it might accuse him next. "It says I agreed to release the fund for family use." I said, "I didn't." Mom finally spoke. "You already finished school." Jason needed a chance. I slid the custodial agreement beside it. Grandma and Grandpa didn't write Jason's chance. They wrote my education and professional training. Jason's face hardened. You act like you're the only one who works hard. I looked at him. Then why did you need my grandparents' money in your business account? That was when Mom lost control. Because you don't need saving. She snapped. You never did. You always land on your feet. And Jason doesn't. The room went silent. There it was. The whole family system in one sentence. I had paid for my own program, worked nights, carried debt, and survived exhaustion. So they decided I was safe to rob. Jason needed rescuing. So they called it love. Dad whispered. Helen. She shook her head. No, I am tired of pretending Natalie is the victim because she didn't get money. She clearly managed without. I looked at her and said, I managed without it because you kept it from me. My phone buzzed before anyone could answer. It was an email from Laura Bennett at First Harbor Legal. Subject line, Account Restoration, Notice. I opened it with my hands shaking. The message was short. First Harbor has approved provisional restoration of the disputed education account balance, pending recovery. Jennifer Cole will contact you tomorrow regarding account transfer and beneficiary control. I read it twice. Then looked up. Jason noticed my face. What, he asked. I placed the phone on the table and said, The bank is putting the money back. My mother reached for the chair beside her, like the room had shifted. Jason whispered, They can't do that. Rebecca looked at him and said, Apparently. They can. Jason was the first one to break the silence after I said the bank was putting the money back. Not Mom. Not Dad. Jason. He stood near the kitchen island with his phone in one hand and his face suddenly pale. No, he said. They can't reverse it. That check was already mine. Rebecca looked at him carefully. If it was yours? Why did the bank freeze it? Jason's eyes flashed. Stay out of this. My mother stood too quickly. Natalie. You need to call Jennifer Cole right now and tell her this is a misunderstanding. I looked at her. It stopped being a misunderstanding when someone typed my name on a fake release letter. Dad flinched, but still said nothing. Then Jason's phone started ringing. He looked at the screen and rejected the call. 5 seconds later, it rang again. This time I saw the name before he turned it over. Westbrook Commercial Lending. My stomach tightened. Jason. I said slowly. What were you using that money for? He laughed once. Ugly and nervous. None of your business. Rebecca crossed her arms. It became her business when you tried to deposit her education fund into your company account. Mom snapped. He was trying to save his business. There it was. The truth? Not from Jason, but from the person who had been protecting him. Jason looked at Mom like she had betrayed him. She kept talking anyway. He had a loan deadline. If he missed it, he would lose everything. I stared at her. So you used my grandparents' education fund as emergency business capital. Mom's eyes filled, but her voice stayed sharp. You had already finished school. I opened Grandma Louise's birthday card and placed it on the table. Because I worked nights to pay for it while you kept telling me the account was complicated, Dad finally whispered. Helen. We should have told her. I turned to him. You were there at the bank. He closed his eyes. I know. For the first time all night, Dad looked less like a quiet bystander and more like a man realizing silence had become a signature. The teller hesitated. He said. Mom turned toward him. Richard. He shook his head. No. She asked if Natalie had approved it. Helen said yes. Jason said it was already discussed. I didn't say anything. His voice cracked. I knew Natalie hadn't discussed it with us. The room went still. That was the sentence I had needed and dreaded, not because it changed the bank review. The documents had already done that. But because it proved Dad had known exactly where the line was and watched them cross it anyway, Jason slammed his hand on the counter. So what now? I lose my business because Natalie wants revenge. I looked at him, and for once, I didn't feel small. No. You lose access to money that was never yours. My phone buzzed again. Another email from Laura Bennett. First Harbor's recovery notice had been sent to Jason Parker Business Development LLC and Westbrook Commercial Lending. Any attempt to move, pledge, or conceal disputed funds could trigger further action. I read the line aloud. Jason's face went white. Mom sat down slowly. Dad put both hands over his mouth. I gathered my papers and stood. I'm done talking tonight. Mom looked up at me. Natalie. Please. He'll lose everything. I looked at Jason. Then at Dad. Then back at her. You were willing to let me lose what Grandma and Grandpa saved for me because you thought I was strong enough to survive it. Maybe Jason can learn the same skill. Then I walked out with Rebecca beside me. Leaving the account restoration notice on the table like the final guest at a dinner that had stopped pretending to celebrate me. Dad called me the next morning before my shift. I almost didn't answer. But something about seeing his name felt different after what he had admitted at the table. When I picked up, he did not start with Mom. Jason. Or the bank. He said. I'm sorry. 2 words. No explanation. No defense. For a moment, I didn't speak. Then he continued. I watched your mother use that old license. I heard Jason say you were fine with it. I knew you weren't. His voice broke, and I let them keep going because I was afraid if I stopped it, Jason's business would collapse, and your mother would never forgive me. I sat on the edge of my bed in silence. Dad had always been the quiet parent. The one who looked tired when Mom got cruel. The one who said, "Let's not make this worse," after it was already worse. But hearing him say he knew made the old ache sharper. You didn't just stay quiet. I said. You made the lie look safe. He exhaled like the words hurt because they were true. I know. Then he told me something I hadn't known. Grandma Louise had once made him promise the account would stay for my education, even if the family had other emergencies. She said, "Richard, Natalie will be the one everyone assumes can wait. Don't let them make her wait forever." My throat tightened. "And you still did?" He didn't argue. Yes. That single honest word mattered more than any long apology would have. Dad said First Harbor Legal had contacted him for a statement. They wanted to know whether he had witnessed the withdrawal, whether I had been present, whether he heard anyone claim I had approved it. "What are you going to tell them?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "The truth." I looked at the folder on my desk. Grandma's card resting on top. Even if Mom is angry, his answer came softly, especially then. That afternoon, Jennifer emailed me a copy of Dad's signed witness statement. It was short, but every line landed. I was present at First Harbor Bank during the withdrawal. Natalie Parker was not present. I did not hear Natalie give verbal approval. I observed Helen Parker state that Natalie had agreed. I did not know that to be true. I failed to correct it. I read the last sentence 3 times. I failed to correct it. It did not fix what happened. It did not make him brave retroactively, but it put responsibility where it belonged. An hour later, Mom texted me, "Your father is confused. Don't use his guilt against this family." I saved it. Then Jason texted, "Dad just destroyed me." I stared at those words and felt the final shape of the family system become clear. Jason did not say, "Dad told the truth." He said, "Dad destroyed me." In his mind, the damage was not what they had done. The damage was that someone had finally said it out loud. That evening, Jennifer called. "Natalie, Your father's statement significantly strengthens the restoration review. I closed my eyes. Does it change anything? Yes. She said, it confirms the bank should not have accepted the family's verbal representation without contacting you. Legal is moving from provisional restoration to final correction. My hand went to Grandma's birthday card. Final correction. I repeated. Jennifer's voice softened. It means the account will be restored under your sole control. For years, my family had told me the fund was complicated. It turned out the truth was simple. It had always been mine. The final correction letter arrived from First Harbor Legal 2 days later. I was sitting in my car outside the hospital after another 12-hour shift when the email notification appeared on my phone. Subject line, Custodial Education Account Review Final Determination. For a moment, I just stared at it. Part of me was afraid to open it. Not because I thought the bank would side with my parents, but because seeing the truth written officially meant I could no longer pretend this had been a misunderstanding. I opened the PDF with my thumb shaking. The first paragraph was formal. The second paragraph was clear. First Harbor determined that the withdrawal from the Natalie Parker custodial education account was improperly authorized due to verification failures, expired identification acceptance, lack of adult beneficiary confirmation, and reliance on an unverified third-party release letter. The account balance would be restored in full, under my sole control. I read those words twice, then a third time, until they stopped looking like legal language and started feeling like my grandparents reaching through paper to keep their promise. Jennifer called 15 minutes later. I wanted you to hear it from me too. She said, the restoration is final. The money will be placed into a new beneficiary-controlled education account. Unless you choose another qualified structure. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the seat. So Mom can't access it anymore? No. Jennifer said, your mother's custodian authority should have ended years ago. The new account will require your authorization only. I thought about all the years Helen Parker had told me the fund was complicated. Intouchable. Not ready. Better saved for later. The truth had never been complicated. The truth had been inconvenient for her. Jennifer continued. First Harbor will pursue recovery separately from the cashier's check, the receiving business account, and any parties involved in the improper withdrawal. I knew what that meant without asking. Jason's business would remain frozen until the bank sorted through what he had tried to take. Mom would not be able to make this disappear, with tears at a dinner table. Dad's witness statement would sit in a file beside the teller notes and the typed letter. For once, Consequences had a mailing address. That evening, Mom came to my apartment without calling first. I saw her through the peephole holding a manila folder and wearing the same expression she used when she wanted an argument to look like a sacrifice. I opened the door but did not invite her in. Natalie, she said, we need to fix this before Jason loses his company. I almost laughed at the word fix. It had followed my family for years. Fix Jason's rent. Fix Jason's taxes. Fix Jason's loan. Fix Jason's embarrassment. But when my education fund was gone, when I worked nights and skipped sleep to pay tuition, nobody called that something to fix. The bank already fixed it. I said, they put the money back. Her face tightened. You know what I mean. She opened the folder and pulled out a printed page. Jason can sign a repayment agreement with you privately. You can release the bank claim, and we'll keep this out of legal trouble. I looked at the paper. It was not from a lawyer. It was something Mom had typed herself, full of soft phrases like family resolution and mutual understanding. At the bottom was a blank line for my signature. My chest went cold. Even after the bank investigation, the fake release letter, the old license, the witness statement, and the final correction, my mother had come to my door with another paper for me to sign. No, I said. She blinked. You haven't even read it. I don't need to. I'm not signing anything you brought. Her eyes filled immediately. But I had finally learned that tears could be real and manipulative at the same time. Jason is your brother. I nodded. And Grandma Louise was my grandmother. That stopped her. For the first time, she looked less angry than exposed. I continued. She saved that money for my education. You spent years making me believe I had to wait. Then used my name to give it to him. Mom whispered. You managed without it. I held the door steady. That doesn't mean you were allowed to take it. She stood there for a few seconds, holding the unsigned paper between us. Then she said the sentence I think she had believed for years. Strong children don't need as much. I felt something inside me finally settle. Maybe, I said, but strong children still deserve what was promised to them. I closed the door before she could answer. Then I walked to my desk, opened the folder labeled Education Fund Records, and placed First Harbor's final correction letter on top. For the first time, the folder did not feel like evidence. It felt like an ending. For 2 weeks after First Harbor restored the account, my family went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, waiting quiet. The kind of quiet that meant my mother was choosing which version of the story to tell next. Jason stopped texting after Laura Bennett sent him a formal recovery notice. Dad emailed once to say he had given the bank his full statement and would not ask me to withdraw the claim. I read that email 3 times. It was not a grand apology. But it was the first time my father had chosen truth before comfort, and for now, that was enough. Jennifer called me the following Friday to finalize the new account structure. You can transfer it into a beneficiary-controlled education account, she said, or move it into another account in your own name. I looked at Grandma Louise's birthday card on my desk. For the girl who will use it well, can I use part of it for continuing education? I asked. Yes, Jennifer said. That was the original purpose. I smiled for the first time in days. Then that's what I'm doing. I enrolled in the certification program I had delayed for years because tuition felt impossible. Then I asked Jennifer one more question. Can I also set up a small scholarship fund later? She paused. Then said, that sounds like something your grandparents would have liked. That Sunday, Mom sent one final message. You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth losing your family. I saved it. But I didn't answer. Then I opened my laptop and filled out the paperwork for the Louise and Walter Parker Nursing Scholarship, a small fund for working nurses returning to school. It wasn't huge. It wasn't dramatic. But it turned the money back toward the purpose my grandparents had chosen before my mother ever decided Jason needed it more. When Dad heard about the scholarship, he called and cried quietly on the phone. Your grandmother would have loved that, he said. I believed him. Then he added, I should have protected it. I looked at the restored account letter beside me. Yes, I said. You should have. He didn't defend himself. He only said, I know. Sometimes healing begins with someone finally not arguing with the truth. Jason never apologized. Mom never admitted she stole anything. But First Harbor's final correction letter said enough. My grandparents' promise had been restored. Not because my family became honest, but because the records did. And when the first scholarship application came in from a 42-year-old nurse named Maria who wrote, I thought I was too old to go back. I cried at my kitchen table. Not from sadness this time. From recognition. Grandma Louise had been right. Education money should never be used to decide which child is worth saving. It should open a door for someone who was told to wait too long. A year after First Harbor restored the account, I walked across another stage. This time, it wasn't for a graduation ceremony. It was for the annual scholarship luncheon at St. Hyman, Ann's Medical Center. The Louise and Walter Parker Nursing Scholarship had helped 3 working nurses return to school that year. and the hospital invited donors to meet the recipients. I almost laughed when I received the invitation because I had never imagined myself as someone who funded scholarships. A year earlier, I had been sitting in a bank conference room wondering whether my own education fund had disappeared forever. Now I was watching 3 women in blue uniforms talk about the degrees they thought they were too old to finish. Jennifer Cole attended the luncheon as a guest. We had stayed in touch after everything ended, though mostly through holiday cards and the occasional email. When she saw the scholarship brochure with my grandparents' names printed across the front, she smiled. "I thought you might do something like this," she said. I looked down at the program. I almost didn't. She raised an eyebrow. Why, I laughed softly. Because for a long time, every document connected to that account reminded me of my family. Jennifer nodded. And now I looked around the room at nurses laughing together over lunch. Now it reminds me of my grandparents. Dad came too. He walked a little slower than he used to, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies that he quietly placed beneath my grandparents' framed photograph before anyone noticed. He found me afterward and said, "Your grandmother always believed education outlived arguments." I smiled sadly. She was right. He looked around the room. Watching the scholarship recipients, talking with their families, this is what the account was always supposed to become. I didn't answer immediately because I was thinking about how close we had come to losing all of it, not just the money, but the purpose behind it. Finally, I said, "It almost became Jason's business loan." Dad lowered his eyes. "I know." Then, after a long silence, he added, "Thank you for saving what I didn't." I still see my mother occasionally at family gatherings. We are polite. Careful. There are conversations we no longer try to have because they belong to a version of our family that only existed when silence was more valuable than honesty. Jason eventually sold his business after struggling with debt for another year. He never blamed himself. As far as I know, he still tells people the bank overreacted. Maybe that's the story he needs. Mine is different. Mina Hastela notes. Compliance reviews. Witness statements, legal findings, and one very stubborn grandmother who believed promises should survive the people who made them. People sometimes ask whether I regret taking the case to the bank. They usually mean the same thing in different words. Was the money worth the family conflict? I always answer the same way. The conflict was already there. The paperwork just stopped hiding it. If I had stayed quiet, everyone would have remembered Jason as the son who received help and me as the daughter who never needed any. My grandparents would have become another story rewritten by the loudest voice in the room. Instead, the records preserved what they actually intended. I still keep one folder in the top drawer of my desk. Inside are Grandma Louise's birthday card, the custodial account agreement, the withdrawal authorization with the false signature, the teller notes, the compliance report, Dad's witness statement, and First Harbor's final correction letter. Not because I expect another fight. Not because I enjoy remembering what happened. I keep them because every page tells the same truth from a different angle. Strength is not permission for people to take what was promised to you. The last page in the folder isn't from the bank. It's a copy of the first scholarship certificate awarded in my grandparents' names. Every time I look at it, I think about something Grandma Louise wrote when I was 8 years old, for the girl who will use it well. For years, I thought she was talking about the money. Now I know she was talking about something much bigger. She wasn't leaving me an account. She was leaving me a responsibility. And in the end, that turned out to be the most valuable inheritance of all. Night shifts teach a person how much can happen while the rest of the world is asleep. For 3 years, I learned medications, staffing charts, patient families, and the quiet discipline of staying awake when my body wanted to quit. My parents looked at that endurance and mistook it for proof that I no longer needed what had been promised to me. But endurance is not constant. Surviving without help does not turn a stolen promise into a generous redistribution. Grandma Louise's birthday cards had never been about spoiling me. They were about protecting a purpose. She and Grandpa Walter did not save that money, so the loudest emergency in the family could rename it. They saved it so education would remain a door, not a prize handed to whichever child appeared most helpless at the right moment. That was the lesson I carried forward. Never let people use your strength as evidence that your rights are optional. Strong people may keep going, but they still deserve what was set aside for them. Scriptwriter Nguyen Van Chien.